Welcome back, everybody, to Friggin' Good Politics, episode 6. It's me and Derek, and this is going to be a great episode. We have an
Oh yeah,
amazing special guest. Derek had to
the
pull in a lot of
best.
favors, pull a
Took a
lot of
lot.
strings to get this favor done to trick her to come on here. Derek, we have Molly Thomas with us. Derek, can you introduce us? Who is Molly? How do you know her? What's the story? How'd you get her on here?
Well, she's one of the best people I know, and she knows me, so that's how she got on here. Is barely we got a big TV talk show host to come onto our program, so that's great. But yeah, Molly and I knew each other in Regina from our days in Saskatchewan, and I've been a big admirer of Molly's career, and we're gonna get into that how she did all this. But I just love her story because she really grinded her way to the top. If you go and look at her LinkedIn,
Yeah,
I'm looking. She
there's
started
this
global
long
TV.
list.
Oh
It's
yeah.
beautiful.
I'm going to go through it, Molly, if you're okay with that.
Oh man.
Started Global TV Edmonton, script writer, intern.
Intern.
Yeah.
Ooh, oof.
Yeah, and then she became a video journalist and late night anchor with CTV Regina, and then she went and did a bunch of radio with CBC and others, and then she was the CTV Regina Morning Live person, and I remember that
Super
she was
cool.
big on. You could turn on the TV and see Molly in the morning, and then she worked for the UN and did some really neat stuff there,
Oh, wow.
and then she was a breaking news reporter with CBC News Network, and then she did a bunch of stuff kind of on her own, some freelance, some conflict area reporting. That's pretty neat. And she's done all sorts of other investigative journalism. And then she was on CTV as a host of CTV News Channel. So you turn on CTV News and see her on there all the time, which was always neat to see. And then she's been a radio host with all sorts of different CBC programs. And now she is the big time host of TVO and the show Big If True. So we're going to talk about that today. And the best part is she's also a Zumba instructor, which I kind of forgot.
Yes, I was going to say, don't forget the Zumba.
You have
Yeah.
you have to get that in there. That's
That's
like
the
my
highlight of the
reprieve.
CV.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the reprieve from all the craziness of journalism. But yes, it's a fun job too.
So, really an amazing journey for you, Molly. And we really want to talk about that journey and hopefully inspire some other people to go into reporting. And we also want to learn kind of about the media landscape, how you're seeing it these days. You're in it. You know what's going on. And so I
Yeah.
think it's be really good for our audience to know what the heck is actually happening in the media landscape because it is confusing. And there's a lot of, we'll talk about your show and misinformation. So thanks for doing this. And
Yes, thank you.
we want to start with your calling into journalism. I know for you it's not just a job, it's much more than that. And I think we need to know, how did that happen? Who inspired you? What inspired you?
Well, I was thinking about this question and I was like, when I was a kid, I remember, I think it was my kindergarten class. And I found out we didn't have a chimney in my house. And I remember thinking about Santa and like, how could Santa get down there? And it used to bother me. And once I figured it out, and when I, started talking to people, I was like, everybody needs to know.
You need to
So
report
I,
this
yeah, I
to
started
the
telling my
authorities.
classmates, there's kids crying. My teacher literally dragged me into the hallway and said, please, like, I know you know what you know, but please don't tell other people. Like, this is not, it's going to create chaos. And I
Yeah.
think from that moment, like, it's like when I figure out things, like, I think we need to tell other people, we need to know, maybe not in the kindergarten version, but generally. So I think that part
Yeah.
of journalism has been in my blood since I was young and a desire to know what's actually true. And I think just over the years, like I love to communicate. I love people.
Mm.
I love to write. And I'm really bad at math and science, even though some journalists are pretty good.
Yeah, you don't
But
need that for being a reporter. No, that's
yes,
good.
Yeah,
you do.
fair.
You
Yeah.
do need that. And I had to go do my master's and, get some economics classes around those things. But
Oh, that's
I
good.
will say that's harder. And so I think when I just look at my natural skill set, it sat around the qualities of journalism. And at the end of the day, like I get paid to talk to people. I
Right.
get paid to listen to people. Like that is the best job. That's the best job in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
great.
So
And,
you weren't
and
convinced by like he uses the door? That didn't sell it for you at 4 years old? You're like, this is garbage. I need answers.
I need
I,
real
I,
facts. Yeah, my parents are realists, so they were like, yeah, you're right. But then I didn't really think about the effect on other little kids. So I've toned
Fair.
it down a little bit. But now that
Nice.
I'm, I think we need to come back to the facts.
Yeah.
yeah,
Santa
that's great.
truther from age 4 on. Nice.
Yeah. Hide your children, please.
So you've kind of always had this investigative type side to you, and did that like was that it can couldn't have just been the Santa thing. Like, was there any people you looked up to, any mentors, any TV show hosts, reporters that you're like, I want to be like them when I grow up?
Yeah, I mean, I rushed home every day to watch Oprah.
Oh,
What
wow.
Oprah
Okay.
did for me was
Mm.
that she, of course, she left like kind of traditional journalism, went more into talk show. But
Right.
what I like about her is that whether she's talking to a politician or she's talking to a celebrity or she's talking to just a person on the street, she talks to
Mm.
them the same.
Mm.
Yeah.
And there's
Right.
something in that that resonated with people. Obviously, she's one of the most successful people to ever be on TV. But
Mm.
I just like, I'm so drawn to the way that she interacts with people. And I just love that. Sometimes you'll hear like a broadcast voice, like now I'm on the radio. Like
Right.
I've actually hated that my whole career. And I've
Right.
tried to stay away from it. And, I'm grateful that it's worked for me, but I really liked that in Oprah, that she was always kind of talking the same, the best,
Right.
elevated version of yourself
Authentic.
but authentic. There was something about that that I really liked. And so she was definitely one of my faves. And then,
Mm.
I love the Datelines. I love the 2020s,
Mm.
Barbara. Like I've loved W5 growing up. Like, so
Right.
to be able, to work on W5 here in Canada when it existed.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say rest in peace, man. That was
yeah,
just such a loss.
exactly. There's a
Mhm.
version of it, but it's not quite the same. Um, yeah, it was just incredible because we don't have that kind of long form investigative journalism. It's getting cut
Mhm.
back more and more. It's expensive to make, but I
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
it's worth it. So I'm really grateful that I've been able to be a part of some things like that.
That's great.
Nice.
Well, and you've done a little bit of everything. Like I was mentioning, you reported in the conflict zones. You had that great piece on Afghanistan women and what was going on there, and you've reported on global issues, and you're now leading these national conversations on Big If True. Uh, Describe that journey a little bit of, you started from the bare bottom, you're an intern, and you've kind of worked your way up. Like, how did it feel kind of going up, and, what sort of emotions did you go throughout the journey? Kind of take us through that a little bit.
Well, only crazy people go into journalism.
Right.
You guys know that, right?
Yeah.
I
It's
think
like
the
politics.
sane,
Only
yeah,
crazy people
Yeah,
get in.
exactly,
only
exactly.
insane people. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
sane people are in it for a few years and probably find something else. But no,
Right.
I honestly, it's a grind right from the start. I
Hmm.
mean, journalists are starting at like $30,000, $40,000 in Canada. Like, how do you
Yeah.
even survive on that? But I remember
Not
those
well.
days. I
Yeah.
remember those days. And, I think for me, I always had in my mind, like I was always so intrigued by the world. And
Hmm.
my
Yeah.
parents and my family really raised us as a global family, traveling, seeing, the best of things in the world, but also like the worst.
Right.
And, poverty at like significant levels and, taking us and walking us through slums in different countries and saying like there's no difference between you and these kids.
Mm.
The only
Yeah.
difference is like, for whatever reason, you have been here, you are here. So what are you going to do about it? And
Yeah.
I think that, has really shaped not only me, my siblings, all of us in our family to be very globally minded.
Mm.
And that has definitely impacted, for me, even as a journalist, starting off in smaller places like Regina, I always had a lens to the world. Like I want to do other stories. And I think Saskatchewan people at that time, I think they want more than that's just in their backyard. So pushing for
Yeah.
stories,
Mm.
in
For
Haiti,
sure.
pushing for stories in different parts of the world, Iraq when ISIS was going crazy, Somalia, when they were on the brink of famine, like pushing for these stories that if you can get on the ground and start talking to people, you can relate them back. I mean, if I think of
Hmm.
my time in Somalia, I'm looking out at the fields, the farmers' fields, and I'm like, this looks like home, but just like scary,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like I get this
Interesting.
world. Like these are my friends at home, and if this
Hmm.
was happening on the farmers' fields in Saskatchewan, this would be devastating.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, being able to be on the ground and relate things back to Canadians, like Canadians care about these things. I have had a lot of news directors that have said, oh, people won't care about that. And every time I do one of these stories, I prove them wrong.
It's a
And
hit.
so
Mm.
I think for me, yes, coming up in different places, whether it's Regina, whether it's Quebec, whether it's Toronto, Ottawa, wherever, I always had that global mind. And so as long as I'm doing whatever I'm doing in the normal newsroom, if I could keep that in my mind and go off and do special projects, then yeah, I feel like I'm like contributing to what I feel my calling is in journalism around social justice and stories that are not often heard.
Right.
Nice.
Right. What's maybe the piece you're most proud of?
Oh, that's a tough
Or a
question.
moment where you're like, this was the most impactful thing that I've put out or talked about. Like there's probably maybe I'll say top three because it's probably hard to pick one.
Yeah. And it
Yeah,
can't be
well,
Santa Claus because we already touched on that.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
no more
already
Santa.
got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I just finished a fellowship on Afghan women, Derek, as you
Right.
mentioned, and It was a grind of a story because I got the fellowship, which is from the Michener Deacon Fellowship, which is one of the biggest
Mhm.
fellowships in the country. It's about public service journalism, and I wanted to go to Afghanistan to interview women who have lost out on school and on so many other freedoms in their life that are just basic human rights. And I had got that with the network. I was with CTV National at the time and with W5. And
Mhm.
the same week I officially got that award, I lost my network job.
Mm.
Mm.
And so all of a sudden, I'm looking at the biggest project I've ever wanted to tackle in one of the most dangerous countries where women
Yeah.
have no worth,
Right.
and I have no rights. And I'm a brown woman, so I don't even
Mhm.
look like a Westerner. So um, just dangerous and complex is what I would say. And so I
Right.
spent, something that would have probably taken me 4 years, 4 years, 4 months with a network, with all the infrastructure, producers, the security, like all of that behind you. I spent the last year and a half plugging away to
Yeah.
safely figure out how to do that story. So if people want to listen, it's called Dear Taliban. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. And it kind of
Nice.
walks you through that journey. So I won't give it all away, but I'm very proud of being able to put that together. I think it's very meaningful, and two of the three girls that I profile in that podcast are now in more safe situations. So
Oh, that's good.
Amazing.
yeah, yeah. So there is like some hope, but yeah, I believe in stories like that, even when you know the big bosses say it's too expensive. Like I
Yeah.
believe it's worth pursuing, but
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of personal cost involved in like chasing stuff like that.
Hmm.
There
Yeah,
is.
I can imagine. Absolutely.
Yeah, it requires sacrifice. I think that's the thing I always try to talk to people about is like you can make a difference in politics, you can make a difference in journalism, you can make a
Yeah.
difference in business. And I think what you have that's unique, Molly, is that you are driven to make a difference in a positive way. And that's why that's one of the things I want people to take away from this interview is that you can make a difference through journalism. And there's, I kind of want to get into the touchy feely stuff about journalism later, but I think people need to still consider going into this career. I know it's harder these days. There's not as many good opportunities, but we still need really good journalists. And
Totally.
Molly's one of them. So that's great. But I want to pivot to the new gig that you're in. So you grinded your way
Yes.
to this. You've had so many good experiences. I've seen you on TV so much. And so now you have your own show. So how did
Yeah.
that feel when you landed that?
Well, that was exciting because it was like right
Yeah.
when I kind of finishing the fellowship and it was like, yes, we have something cool to look forward to. I'm
Yeah.
like a creator and I love to innovate and try new things. I love to throw things at the wall and be
Hmm.
like, that works, that doesn't work. So, being able to be on a smaller team and to do that on a daily basis is really, really fun and really
Yeah.
cool. And in an industry that's cutting back, it's exciting to
Hmm.
be a part
Yes.
of something new.
Yeah.
It's a great
Um,
name for a show too. Like 10 out
Ooh,
of 10
thank you.
name choice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, it's called Big If True. And we essentially look at misinformation, which is, you know, the information that we are sharing, tweeting, liking. It may not be true, but we're doing it and it kind of spreads. And then also at disinformation, like targeted,
Hmm.
oftentimes in politics, approaches that are literally just trying to mislead people.
Right.
And they can be used very nefariously. So, yeah, we're looking at that. We're trying to help people understand some context, some nuance, to work through different topics. We've done everything from like, UFO conspiracies and how scams are affecting people today. We've
Right.
done wellness trends. Like, think of all the things you get on
Oh
Instagram
my
that are coming
gosh.
at you. You're trying to be sold, and you're like, well, I'm going to look younger. I'm going to look better. Like, went through some of those. We've done, of course, politics. Like, you cannot run away
The
from that.
tariff
It's
stuff, I
around,
saw that.
yeah, the
Yeah.
tariff
I
stuff. Like, you
appreciated
just
your
can't go away
fentanyl
from
work
it.
on that the episode you did on the fentanyl. I appreciated
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, it's important because, we hear a lot of information and you can't expect Canadians to be able to weed through all of that. And so it's nice to be able to step back as journalists and say, okay, like what do people need to know and what more do we know about this context so that, Donald Trump can't just tell us a bunch of stuff and we take it in
Hmm.
as God's word?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it interesting. I don't want to get too deep into Donald Trump here, but he lies about mostly everything from what I can tell. But there's always like just a tidbit of truth in there that makes the lie sort of passable. And
Totally.
so we've kind of gotten to this point where there's this wave of disinformation and misinformation happening, and you probably feel like sometimes it's like, how do I even make a dent here when Donald Trump is just like spewing
Yeah,
stuff
like where
every
do you
single day? Like,
begin?
where do you start? And you have like a million things on Instagram and
Oh
Facebook
man.
and TikTok and everything. So I'm sure it feels overwhelming. So how do you deal with that? What's the next step there for you?
I mean, I don't think you can give up. I mean, we are swimming
Yeah.
against an ocean, and it's not,
Right.
Donald Trump is one part of it, but there
Yes.
have been, if you think of Russia's history, which of disinformation campaigns and how they try to influence
Right.
the West and democracy, like this is something we've been dealing with for decades. We actually get into that in this week's show.
Oh,
And
good.
so, and now, China, India, there's so many players in this, and we do it too,
Right.
Yeah,
right? We do it too. So
Yeah.
I'm not,
For
I'm
sure we do.
not putting us off the hook. I'm just saying,
Hmm.
like, the world we're in with technology and how fast things are moving,
yeah,
disinformation and misinformation has always been around. That's not
Yeah.
something new. It's just
Yeah.
that technology that exists can push it so much faster
yeah,
and it can get in front of us so much quicker. And if we're not careful to take a step back, to check what our emotions are doing when we're taking in information, to know where to fact check and look into more sources,
Hmm.
like the ocean's going to take us over. But I will say,
Yeah.
yes, we are swimming against an ocean. We're just trying to equip people with, better life jackets.
Yeah.
nice. I like that metaphor. That's good.
Yeah, I do feel like your show's actually really educational. When I watched it, it's like I actually felt like this is very valuable public kind of information for consumption, and but it's done in a unique way. What do you think about social media? Like, so I think of X having their community notes. I don't think there's a lot of that in other social media platforms. Do you think we need more of that, or what do you
I
think a
mean,
community
Community
notes?
Notes was a downgrade from fact checkers, right?
Right,
Community
right,
Notes was a change that
right,
X made. I don't mind Community Notes, but I do think there is value to having organizations that all they do is look at the facts and the
right.
nuance, right? And so I
Yeah,
think taking those out of the equation for social media companies can be dangerous for sure.
yeah,
Because Community Notes, any of us can fill it in. Like if I went, for
sure.
example, and wrote a paper and I sourced everything from Wikipedia, which any of us can put notes into, would
Hmm.
that paper be valid?
Right,
Maybe some points, but like I'd need a lot more sources. So I community notes concerns me for that reason, because again, when we talk about nefarious actors
right.
that want certain narratives to exist, then yeah, they're going to find ways to be in the community notes. And there's who's the other level of accountability. Now, looking into the fact-checking organizations and making sure that they're not politically spun, or that they're actually able to like
Yeah,
wade into the nuance and context is important. I'm not saying that's
totally.
not important. And if journalists also make mistakes sometimes, if there's a mistake made, let's correct it. Let's like
Hmm.
put a notice on it that yes, we looked at this a little more, we had this brought to our attention. But to get rid of the fact-checking organizations that exist to look at what is happening, no, I just don't buy that.
Right, right. So you,
I
you think
appreciate it. Oh,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead,
Derek.
Greg.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was just
Oh,
gonna say I
so
appreciated that at least like community notes. Like I've seen Elon Musk and Donald Trump and JD Vance all get community noted. So I was like, oh, okay, well at least it's still functioning in some regard.
There's some for sure. And like it's not like, throw everything out, but I do
Mhm.
think, you know, I do think there is a place for people that all they do is look at this stuff. I was just watching the Congress speech from last night. I watched it in real time
Mhm.
that Donald Trump gave to Congress, but the BBC did a verify on it this morning. And it's like, yeah, like a lot of those things would just go over our head
Right.
on the first run. And I don't
Yeah,
expect everybody to like be as up to date as those of us that are in the news every day. So
totally.
yeah,
Mhm.
we all need a little help.
Yeah. Yeah. We need more of it, not less, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Now, I want to shift to some, and Greg, feel free to jump in here too.
Yeah,
The idea of bias in journalism,
Mhm.
and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it just seems like it's grown in the even the last 2 3 years, where there's always been bias in the media, but there it seems like when I watch CNN and Fox News, it's like it's so like they're not even trying anymore. They're just repeating talking points from one side, and I look at you and it's like I feel like you're one of the most fair, balanced journalists that I know, and I follow lots of them, and there's some good ones and obviously some bad actors. But do you think it's gotten a lot worse? And if so, what do we do about it?
It's a tough question.
It's a big
I
question.
always thought that I personally would go to the US at some point
Right.
to work. As I grew up, there were certain networks that I always wanted to work for. And um, I've kind of like, for many reasons, I've kind of like sat back a little bit more from that in the
Mhm.
last 8 years. Not saying that may never happen, but it definitely causes pause when I watch certain things and I wonder, the language, how we frame things, how we're fair. So yeah, like I admit there are definitely ways that the media can improve. I think that now that everybody has a voice, and yes, media organizations, of course, just the scrutiny is so high, and some of it is warranted.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
but people, are just like people can, look at one thing and then write off an entire organization.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really detrimental,
Mm.
especially in a shrinking media landscape. Now, I would never tell people like you should only, listen to the CBC or you should only listen to CTV or you should only listen to my show on TVO. Never. I've
Right.
never said that, no matter what
Right.
network I've worked for. I believe a diversified news
100%.
landscape of what you're taking in is really important. And I also think it's really important on your Twitter feeds where you have, really loud voices on your X feeds, that you should have people that you totally disagree with.
Mhm.
And you should listen to them because there are things in there that while you might be like, this is not true, there's also some truth in there, or there's some feelings in there that need to be addressed, and somehow
Mhm.
that's not being heard. So even if you can get past your own anger at like what's being put out, you can actually get a sense of, okay, so this is some of the areas that people are sore on, or maybe the media has missed.
Mhm.
So I always encourage people like it's difficult work, but it's important work. And I think as
Mhm.
journalists who represent the country, um, if you're not comfortable talking to people that like disagree with you, then you don't have a wide enough circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your
Yeah.
like? I suppose you've kind of already been talking about them. Like, what are your gut check places that you go to be like, okay, like I'm pretty sure about this, but like I want to see what the other side's saying about this. I have my like on like you were saying on Twitter, like there's right wing people I follow, there's left wing people I follow. So I try to find like where are the areas where we're getting like an alignment on frequency here, where like you can kind of find out where the truth is. Do you have sources that you go to, or is it variety?
There's a variety, but I do like that's why I go back to some of those fact checking sources. I really like Snopes. There's factcheck.org. There's some organizations like all they're doing is
Mm.
like looking at like, okay, you said this, let's look at it. And then
Mm.
historic context to what you're saying. And
Yeah,
they're actually very good.
Mm.
If there's like claims, like the claims are there. You can go back, look at the archive claim. You can look at the people that are like upset about it. Like they show you. And I appreciate that. Like that's a lot of work. And people don't always appreciate how long it takes to fact check something. Like you can say whatever you want and it's out there. Sometimes it takes days, like a week to do a proper fact check if it's a complicated issue. And by that time, one of the stories we did or one of the episodes was on the liar's dividend. By that time, you sow enough like doubt in people's minds that they become like about a fact that like before would never have been disputed. It puts them in this zone of like, I don't know what to believe, and so maybe I won't believe anything. And so it's actually
yeah,
very
Mm.
dangerous. The work of those fact checkers, like it's very thorough. It's
Right.
very thorough. And like even on my own team, we have Kat, our lead researcher, who fact checks more, more than any other team I've been on because we have to for what we're doing. But
Mm.
yeah,
like it is so exceptionally done well. Like the amount of work and time that she puts into and the amount of like um research papers that we're reading, like, does this conflict? Is that a fair sentence? What about this one word? Like,
Mm.
people don't know how much work goes into one line of text that you hear on the radio or on
yeah.
TV,
Fair enough.
right? And so I think that, yeah, those kinds of sources, like, I'm always checking, like, what are they saying? What are they finding? What are they saying about this? Because there could always be, like, as you guys know, in politics, there's also just like a layer of like political language around things.
Yes.
Totally.
And then
Yeah.
there's like facts and there's context to both. And so I always appreciate when people are able that are have no partisan or should, like they don't have an investment. They just have an investment to give people more
Mhm.
plain, like this is what's going on and this is some of the context. Like I'll always appreciate that kind of journalism.
Okay.
Would you say Snopes? What is that one?
Yeah, Snopes.com. It's like a
Snopes.com.
really,
Okay.
really good fact checking website.
Oh,
And a
okay.
lot of people
Mm.
don't know about it, but it is
Mm.
excellent. I've
Mm.
been using it for about 10 years and
Mm.
I think they're one of the best in the business.
Mm. That's pretty good. So are they publicly funded or where do they come from? Or how do they get there?
I'm not sure actually, but a lot of these things are, Derek. A
Right.
lot of
Right.
them are because
Yeah.
it's like they're publicly funded or get grants from, organizations that
Right.
say like this is an important part of like
Hmm.
information that's fair and accurate.
Mhm.
But yeah, I remember, I think maybe it's factcheck.org that is fully publicly funded when it was started.
Right.
But yeah, like, there's a need for it for sure. So it's important work.
Yeah, I agree. Well, speaking of the publicly funded side of things, you've obviously worked at CBC. You're working at TVO right now. What do you think the role is for publicly funded journalism in the Canadian media
Yeah,
landscape?
very good
How,
question.
obviously that's changing. You have a lot of political rhetoric about that nowadays. How do you think that that's shifting? And if this isn't there, what replaces it?
Yeah. I heavily believe in publicly funded journalism. If you look at the privates, and I've worked for both, they are cutting like crazy.
Right.
Um, the privates, it's still run by the bottom line. And what I will say, in a benefit to the public broadcaster, there's so many stories that I would have loved to have done at the privates, and it's just very difficult because of your teams are so small.
Mm,
Whereas there was a lot more opportunity to be like, we aren't covering this part of the country. We aren't covering this issue. We aren't looking at this. And what places like CBC allow you to do is like you have a team that maybe you can take a couple days to actually go get that niche story. And I think in a country like Canada, which is so diverse and so spread out, like,
very.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, it's not just all about Toronto or the Reginas or the Calgarys. Like, it is about the rural communities where the majority of Canadians are, right? So you have to get a pulse and you need to be able to go off and do those stories. That's
Mhm.
not always possible in the media landscape that exists. And so the public broadcaster should be filling those gaps. And they do. They have, stations in like the smallest places that like some people in Canada won't even know the name, but it's
Mhm.
important because that is that community and those issues matter to that community.
Mm,
So, could the public broadcaster, have reforms and changes to be better, more efficient, to be, focusing on the things they do best? Sure, that's a different conversation. But in terms of the value that they bring to Canada, the culture, like we are now dealing with our neighbors to the south that are talking about like taking us over. Like, and that's a takeover, like not only whether you want to do it economically, that becomes culturally, that becomes like
mhm.
everything that
Yeah.
makes us Canadian. You have to think about that. So, what are the things that like define us that we have to see that differentiate us from our neighbors to the south? It's going to matter even more. So that
Mhm.
cultural programming that you don't always get from the privates because it's expensive to do, to be honest, you
Yeah.
find in the public broadcasters. So I think people really need to like think about what they would be giving up if they're fighting about tearing down the CBC.
Right.
So we've talked about the private public divide. We're seeing some, like, or at least it seems like some legacy media outfits are maybe rebounding, or at least they're not dying as badly as was once thought. But what kind of reforms do you think the legacy media, or whatever you want, whatever label you want to give to them, private media, are going to have to make if they want to survive into the future, so that they don't get destroyed by podcasts and other online shows that can outcompete them for free, essentially?
Yeah, yeah. And there are, I think you've seen so many new outlets pop up and a lot of really good journalists like move into like emerging
Yeah.
mediums. So like there's no doubt that's exciting too, because it's innovative and it brings more players to the table. The reform side of things, like I think we need to look at like what we do really well, how we connect with audiences and what are, again, I'm a host of my own show, but I would just say broadly, ways that, yeah, what is the best way to connect with our audiences and what's really working? And like that might be different from community to community. Do you know what I mean? And like maybe it's not a
Mhm.
one brush fits all, but let's figure out what our community really would need from us and let's try to like work with them. So that might look different in Timmins than it looks like in Victoria, or that might look
Mhm.
different in
Totally.
Vancouver than it looks like in Halifax. And so that's harder to do, like big public broadcasters
Yeah.
are big buildings and they have to make those decisions. But I think like maybe being a little bit more nimble to think about, maybe this community, like all we need is a podcast, but maybe this community,
Mm.
we need the TV side. Like I'm not sure. But again, I'm not in those decision making
Right.
positions.
That's not you.
But I will say, like from the public, I'm in another public broadcaster because we do get funding from the Ontario government for what we do because of its educational programming. But yeah, I don't believe that this type of work would necessarily be funded. Like who's like, you know what I mean? Because it's
Mhm.
not like entertainment TV. Like, but it is
Yeah.
there to educate and to help people maneuver through these times. So is it important? Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. But I think that only comes from public funding a lot of the time.
What do you think about like the Substack people? That like
Yeah,
that's not
everyone's got a Substack these days, it seems like.
yeah. So
Yeah,
does
I love
like
it.
yeah,
I love it.
so is there good journalism actually happening on those? Like, I've
100%.
okay, so and but these are most of the time that's just random people. They're either at a foundation or they're
Yeah.
sometimes they're maybe mainstream media. I don't know.
It's a mix. It's a
It's a
mix. Like you
mix.
have a
Okay.
mix of people, but I would say just like you look at your X feed, just as you look at Blue Sky, just as you look at anything else, like,
Mhm.
who's writing it? Where are they coming from? What's their perspective? Who's
Right.
funding them? Like, what's the background? Like, what are their ties politically? Like, you have
Hmm.
to always be thinking about this, but I
Yeah.
think people need to be thinking about that in everything they engage in,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Like
right.
that's just a muscle we need to build, and
Yeah.
we're trying to do that more on our
Well,
show.
your show on kids and the misinformation that they intake. I have a 12-year-old now, and so I almost want to show him that episode and just say like, "Hey, these are some tips for you, kid, for
Yeah.
watching out to see this is AI generated." And my parents, mom, don't listen to this, but it's like sometimes the deep fake stuff is pretty real, and it's getting better and better. It's like I can spot it right now, but I'm like, I wonder if I'll be able to
Yeah.
spot it in 2, 3 years from now. I don't know.
It's
What do
The
so
you?
scary
good.
thought is, have you been fooled and you would never have even known it yet?
Well, maybe I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know. So
It's
that's
so good. And I saw a stat that in the next, I think before 2030, we're going to see 90% of synthetic content online.
That's painful. Have you heard of I guess this is kind of related to journalism. Have you heard of the dead internet theory? Are you familiar with that?
I mean,
So it's this theory that like because there's so much incentive based around content creation that these companies have created these AI bots to go out there and they use ChatGPT and other generative AI tools to just like make up fake content all over the place and flood the internet with
right.
it. And they
mm,
create fake websites and they run and then cite sources from these fake websites. And so like 90% of what we see now on the internet is
mm,
either fake or written by robots.
I
And
believe it. I mean,
it's gonna come crashing down.
we talk about bot farms on our
Yeah.
Russia episode, and it's like a real problem, right? It's like whether they're like literally robots or they're human accounts that are operating at like lightning speed, like there is a financial incentive there for people, often from poor countries, to just like be working around the clock to get this information out. And we know that that can have an effect on, opinions, the way we see the world, the information that we're getting before we go to a voting station. So it matters. Like it really
mm,
matters. So I feel like what we're doing on our show right now is like we're like hopefully there'll be other people that jump into the fray in Canada because this is like serious and I really believe it's a public service.
mm.
Even if people don't realize how dangerous, like the more I get into it, I'm like, oh my goodness.
It's a
Because
little
each
Yeah.
overwhelming.
topic, you're like, whoa, I was just learning about, for example, predatory journals, Greg, which kind of speaks to, like you're saying what's on the internet, but, even in the academic world, there's predatory journals coming out, which
Yeah.
would not be peer reviewed, but they like, the researchers are paid and there's such a like push for academics to publish from the universities. And so like if you publish in one of these predatory journals, like you might be able to get your content out there, but like, what is it doing to like the other mass amounts of research, like, or the peer reviewed
Yeah.
stuff? But the average person, would they know? No, it looks
No.
like it's coming from like a, medical journal. It's like, it's so confusing. So like, I want to do a whole
Mhm.
episode on that, but I'm
That's
just
a good
like,
one.
the amounts of like how persistent that is will shock people. So
Hmm.
it's a big problem.
I know Peter Boghossian's done work on that where they like submitted um, journals to these publications with terrible source citations, and the journals took them and
Right,
published them. And they were like,
right,
"You guys need to be better at your jobs. Like this is ridiculous. Like that you're
right,
letting us
right.
publish this crap." So I believe it.
I
Yeah.
think the one of the problems is this is the game that gets played in public influence. We try to like uncover this from the podcast side. Is okay, what is the game being played? And I remember the first time someone sort of alerted me that like beer and wine companies will fund studies and research in order to tell people that beer and wine is good for you, which
Oh,
maybe there
wait,
are
what?
some it's not good. Apparently it's good for you. I remember
What?
growing up and saying like, oh, beer is really good for you. I didn't realize that. And it's like and then someone told me like, yeah, that's funded by like Labatt and all these
Totally.
kind of places. And it's like, so it's always been there, and it's always been this game that it's like, if I can get more of my research and more
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
my opinions out there, and now it's just like the person that can run the bots the best are
Yeah.
getting it out there more and more and more. And it's just it, yeah, I guess it's like you're sort of overwhelming people in with disinformation, and then it's like you just can't even tell. But I know you talked about this on your show before too, is like people are just not caring anymore. It's like I just don't believe anything.
Yeah, I see that a lot.
That's the worst. That's the
Yeah.
worst because then you get a disengaged society.
Right. Then your
And
democracy suffers big time.
right, totally. So that's
Mhm.
actually the long-term worry that you have, or you would just have, I talk to a lot of young people because our show is really aimed towards like kind of 20 to 40. We get a
Mhm.
variety of people in there, but that is
Yeah.
the hope. And a lot of, young people I talk to, like I remember one girl I was chatting with, she's like, yeah, I get all of my news from TikTok. And I said,
Mhm.
interesting. So, like how do you, if you see something on TikTok, like how do you verify that that influencer is actually telling you the truth?
Right.
And she's like, well, I don't really think about anything like that. And I was like, fair. I was like, have you ever heard of the New York Times? Have you ever heard of the BBC? She didn't know what the Times was,
Oh wow.
you know, arguably one of the best in the world. Um,
Mhm.
and so not that you have to read the New York Times, but just even like for that younger generation that's only grown up on socials, if that's all they're getting, and you have very convincing influencers who sometimes have alleged ties to other countries that
Mhm.
may
Yeah,
want to, harm democracy. Um, that's very concerning. There's a whole generation that is taking that in and taking it in as this is the truth without questioning it. So I just want people to question. Like I'm not here to tell
totally.
you what to think. It's your job to think. But my
Yeah.
hope is that we can expose you, and learn
Yeah.
about these
Mhm.
so that you can like make a more informed decision about how you live your life.
Right.
I think both the left and the
Mm.
right would benefit greatly from exercising our skeptical muscle whenever
100%.
we encounter things. Absolutely. Yeah.
100%.
Mm.
100%. So yeah, that's the hope with the show. And we're
That's
having
good.
fun. We're having fun
Nice.
doing it.
That's
There's a
yeah.
lot of content. There's never ending content,
Yeah, you're
sadly.
never gonna run out of shows to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously.
We
Seriously. But it's
solved misinformation. It's over. We did it.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we might be around for a while, but it is a good little team and we believe in what we're doing.
Nice.
No, it's really good. The other question I was going to ask is, how are these private media companies going to fund themselves? And what I've noticed is the ad revenue thing, trying to get just as many clicks and viewership as possible. That's starting to go away, and now it's the subscription model. Because like every time I go to a site, it's like I need a new subscription, and then it's like I need, or I'll use my Apple news subscription, and that's how I get my content. How are you seeing that change? And do you think that's good or bad?
Well, if I was on that side, Derek, I'd be on the business side trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep my job and work. No, I mean, like, I think it's a massive challenge, and I think it
Yeah.
is something that, yeah, I don't think that the companies want to lay off like their best journalists. I think that the
Mhm.
companies, are struggling to figure out how to. The privates are struggling how to figure out how to be
Right.
profitable, and news isn't always profitable. Like, spoiler
That's the
alert.
problem.
Yeah.
Do you know
That's a
what I
good
mean?
point.
It's a public
Yeah.
service. And I think that if you're only thinking about it from a business perspective, like this has to make me money, then
Mhm.
yes, you're going to rely on any avenue that is doing that. But I think if we are in a democracy, like the press, a free press is absolutely essential.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we have to think of it more as a public service than we are as like, how much money is this making me? And that's just like that's like a reality check and a reality shift. And I
Right.
don't think we've always thought of it that way. And in some days in the golden age of TV, there was money coming in,
Right.
Oh yeah.
right? There's money coming in. And so you can afford to like have that on the airwaves. And we're not in that time anymore. And I don't think they've figured out the models for
Yeah.
online yet, how to really capitalize on that.
Mhm.
But
Well, and a
we
lot of them
have
still have huge like downtown Toronto corporate buildings that they have to
totally.
heat and
I'm in a
pay
building.
taxes.
I'm in a
Yeah.
studio, So,
Mhm.
there is still a viewership for that too. So we're kind of in this like interesting time, right? Where technology is moving so fast and the different generations consume so differently.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a very fascinating time in journalism, but I don't think that like the need for public knowledge and for information to make responsible decisions ever goes away.
No,
Yeah.
it's true.
So we just have to figure out how to do it better.
Yeah.
Totally.
I've always heard this in almost any industry in the world. It's like there's always a period of disruption, and then there's a period where things get
Sure.
solidified. And
Totally.
so it was solidified. Now it's massively disrupted, and all these companies are trying to change, and governments don't know what to do anymore. And there's political talking points around it, and then eventually it'll stabilize again. And until we get there, it's probably going to be a little bit messy.
Yeah, it's a wild
Um,
ride. But I will say, like I have a friend here in Toronto. His name's Brandon Gomez. You might have seen some of his stuff online. Like he's someone that broke out of the establishment and said, like, I want to create my own thing. And
right,
like kudos to him because take this big risk and like go off. And like I think that his, media company has been one of the most successful in the digital
right.
side, probably because he had the freedom to try things and to like, build the
Good for
partnership
him.
he wanted to, right? I think it's
Mhm.
great. So like yes, there are tough times in the media industry, but there are also people that are flourishing because they're
Right.
willing to take risks and they're going out and doing things different. So I think, we should also acknowledge that there's opportunity for new voices to be heard. And I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Evan Solomon is a guy that I saw on your show, and I always really liked him and his
Yeah.
commentary. What is he exactly doing? Like, he's on the private side now, but it's with kind of his own company and a startup. Are you familiar with what he's got going on?
So he's with Eurasia Group. Eurasia Group is a massive
Hmm.
political think
Oh, okay. I
tank.
see.
And then G Zero Media is underneath Eurasia Group. And so they're constantly
I
giving
see.
political analysis, and his shows now
Mhm.
focus more on a global context.
I see.
And Evan and I work together in Ottawa at
Right.
the covering politics together. And so he's a good friend of mine. And also
Mhm.
I really value what he brings to the table in terms
Mhm.
of his understanding of not only like the facts of what's going on, but the political layers that exist
Yeah.
within
Right.
some of these really difficult conversations. So yeah, anytime I have a chance to have Evan on the show,
He's
happy to
good.
have him.
Yeah, he's one of
Nice.
my favorites. Another guy where I'm like, he tries to be very fair and balanced and researched.
Mhm.
And I just always try to support those people as much as you can and give them good shout outs. So,
For sure.
um, I know we're running a bit out of time here, but I want to ask more about the journalism career that you've had and obviously continue to still have. But was there any times where you felt like I'm done? Like this is too much. It's like I'm in Afghanistan or I'm somewhere else, and this is scary, and I'm like everything's changing, and I'm like I'm just done with this crap.
Yeah, I'm gonna go work for a consulting firm. Enough of this.
Yeah.
There's been a few that have come around. I think during the fellowship time, because there were so many hurdles that came up in that, and I just was like hitting my head against a wall, and you're doing it by
Mhm.
yourself, which is like even more frustrating when you're used to a
Mhm.
team
Yeah.
environment to work through something. So I there was definitely moments in that year and a half where I was like, am I fighting for things or am I fighting for these stories and people don't even like care? To
Yeah.
me, look at Afghanistan. Like, there's a lot of countries in the world and there's a lot of issues. And I know people have issues going on here in Canada too. We should cover them both because we're a global village and we're all connected. But I think Afghanistan for me was like, we had soldiers that died,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Canadian families are forever connected to that place, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And whatever happens in that country, we will always be intrinsically tied. And
Mhm.
so what I found frustrating was, again, with shrinking newsrooms, shrinking budgets, you're pitching these stories and people are like, I don't know. I don't know, too much liability, or like, I don't know if we have the money for that, or, maybe they just didn't even care. But I'm like, the fact that we don't care shows me that there's a disconnect in some
Right.
places there because I'm like, that is like not even like what, 20 years ago for us. So
Mhm.
Yeah. Geesh.
those kinds of things, there was moments for me that I was like, yeah, I'm a storyteller. I have the privilege of having had the chance to work in news and current affairs, but I can be a storyteller anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's a skill that you take.
Never
And
lose that.
so yeah, there were moments in there where I was wondering, and then this TVO opportunity came around and I thought, it's like a startup that we get to
Nice. Yeah.
like try something and we get to contribute to the public
Mhm.
service. So all of that together was a good fit for me. But yeah, of course. I think every journalist, if they're really honest with you, there's just moments because it is like you have to love this business.
Yeah.
You got to love it because
Right.
waking up at 2:30 in the morning is not a normal thing.
Yeah.
Working for $30,000 in a year is not a normal thing. Like it's a grind and you got to love it. You got to
Yeah.
love it.
If
How
you,
many years
oh,
did
sorry.
you? I was gonna ask how many years did you do the morning show thing where you had to wake up at 2:30? Because I know you did
Oh
CTV
my
Regina
gosh.
mornings,
I did
but
Mornings
then
at Regina, but I also was a backfill for CTV
right.
morning show here in Toronto. And then I did this last year in radio, I did mostly morning. So I was up
Wow.
very early. But it's weird. Like I'm not a morning person. And if I don't have to do a morning show, I wake up at like, I've struggled to get out of bed at like 8:30, like
Right, right.
I am not a morning person, but like the great thing about if you're on a show, like no matter what, you can wake up late, you can come in late, but like your face or your voice is
Mhm.
on the air at 6 a.m. or 5:30, wherever your start is. And if you want to look like an idiot, like it's not a job that you can hide. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not a job where you hide. You're like, oh, I didn't get
Yeah.
this done today, so I'll do it tomorrow. It's like, no,
No.
you have a job to like ask a politician like the questions that the viewers want to hear. You
Mhm.
have a
Yeah.
job to represent the public. And so I take that seriously. And so I think it's one of those, it's tough to get out of bed, but once you're
Mhm.
up, you're excited. And like to be able to like, people want to stay with you for 3 hours of their day, like that's
It's
incredible.
huge. Yeah.
Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that's such an honor that people would want to like spend that time with you. So I think
Mhm.
that's such a special thing, and I'm really grateful I've had the chance to do it, even though it's early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
And Saskatchewan's funny because I grew up in Sask, and that is like home. It will always be home for me.
Yep.
And people there still. I've been gone
Mhm.
for over 10 years. I still get emails, and I still have people stop me on the streets to be like, "When are you coming back?" So like,
Really?
you
Wow.
build such a special like bond with people you've
Yeah.
never met
Yeah.
before
Hmm.
because you like, helped them get up and started for their day. So that
Mhm.
is like so special to me. And like, any place that allows me to connect with people in that way is like, I'm very grateful.
That is
That's
cool.
good.
If you were
Gonna
to
get a
talk
question.
to, oh yeah, here. If you were to talk to like a young person comes up to you, 16, 17, says, "I want to get into journalism or get into the news," like what do you tell that person? What advice do you give them?
I tell them, what is your risk tolerance?
Yeah.
I do
Do
ask
they
this
even know
question.
at 17?
I
Do
do.
they
No,
even know?
I asked them because I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
your personality. I do think that the journalism market as it is built more for freelancers at this point.
Yeah.
It's like
Mm.
more diversified you can be, and if you can jump around, especially when you're starting, because there's not a lot of full-time jobs. So
Right.
like your risk tolerance really matters because those first couple years, like if you want that permanent full-time job, you might be stressed out. If you like need that paycheck after 2 weeks, you might be stressed out. But if you love the chase of being able to use a variety of skills, if you love being able to work with multiple teams, if you can like, wait for a paycheck for a month instead of 2 weeks and be okay with it because you've built other projects to help you get through that month,
Mhm.
you will thrive. And
Okay.
so there is a place for sure for really smart journalists that are young to come up and to also like take over their newsrooms in the digital realm. Because, most people
Right.
are mid-level or higher journalists, like they're fixated on the old traditional mediums and they're really
Yeah.
good at it. So I always tell young journalists, I'm like, let me see your journalism program. If it's not all digital, I don't want to see it. Like
Right.
what is
Fair.
happening? Like you shouldn't be
Mm.
going. Like and I believe in journalism school. It teaches you such valuable things, but I'm like, you need to be preparing people for the future.
Yeah.
And there's already so many journalists struggling to do the mainstream mediums. Like, you need to be coming in with, like, I can, like, do this new thing on TikTok. I can teach you about the latest technology that's coming out. I can show you guys how to do this. Like, they should be teaching us. We should be teaching them. And then you can, like, have this fusion of, like, great knowledge in the room.
Mm.
But yeah, like, if you're innovative and you're ready to take risk and you're ready to move, I'm big on this. Like,
Mm.
there's
Yeah.
not a lot of jobs in journalism. So are you ready to pick up and go get the skills somewhere else if there's a great opportunity? That's another question you got to ask yourself. Not everyone wants to
Mhm.
do that. I get it. It's totally fine. But like that's also the industry. So know what you're going into. Can you cut it? Is that something you want to do with your life?
Right.
It's not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Greg and I would be bad at it because we got young kids right now. So it's like
I'd
we
be
Yeah,
can't
dead.
just move
I
to wherever we want to
2:30
go.
a.m. Oh gosh, no. I already got to get up
totally.
to like deal with my kids at 2:30. I can't get ready
Well,
for work
Yeah.
at 2:30.
those are other beautiful sides of life, right? So you just have to be honest with yourself about
Yeah.
what you want, right? I've been
Right.
traveling around and doing these projects that I love. I'm not responsible for anyone else than me at
Mhm.
this stage of my life. And it allows me to do that. But that's not everybody's dream. That's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Find the
That's
dream
right.
that fits you, find the job that fits you. And again, if you want to be a great storyteller, you can take that in many directions.
For sure
You
you
don't
can.
Yes.
have
Yeah.
to go the news route. It's not the only option, right? So like expand your mind of what you want to do in storytelling. What are you passionate about? And then take it there.
I think if a young person is entrepreneurial and they're a good storyteller, over a period of 2 to 5 years, they could create a massive following for themselves.
Oh my
100%.
gosh, yeah.
And
100%.
so it's like they should consider that. And you still should do freelance. You got to get paid early on. So
Yeah.
it's like I could see you doing some freelance, building up a YouTube following or a
Yeah.
podcast or a Substack or whatever, and you can monetize all those things. If you
100%.
if you do that over a period of 2, 5, 10 years, it's like you're going to be doing very well for yourself.
Totally. And you're
Yeah,
building your own brand, right? Like when
For
I came
sure.
into the business, like it wasn't the same. It wasn't like that. There was still more so mainstream and just the
Right.
socials were just kind of starting.
Yeah, they
And then
weren't
you're
doing.
yeah,
kind of
Yeah.
building in your mid-career and you can't really when you're with a big network, like be
Hmm.
doing things on your own. There's restrictions. But I
Right.
think as a freelancer, as young people, like I think you're bang on, Derek. Like find
That's
the
what I do.
places that you can thrive and build on your own and utilize those connections and networks as much as you can. But that takes a certain personality. Not everybody wants
Yeah, it
that,
does.
but
Yep.
just the reality of the industry, that's what it is. I think if you're going to be great, you're going to want to be like more entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
totally.
Understand the game and play it well. And that's
Yeah,
what I think a younger person has
100%.
to do.
100%.
Yeah.
And a lot of people struggle with that because it's a lot of risk. It's a lot of
Hmm.
risk. So,
Yeah. I, I want to move into rapid fire. We didn't tell you about this, Molly, on
oh no.
purpose. So this is sort of like we have to talk about sports because we talk, we mix sport and politics
I
and
love sports.
public affairs in this. So favorite sports team. What do you got?
Well, I have to say Saskatchewan Roughriders because everyone will
Yes.
crucify me
All
if
right.
not. But I'm
We've
a
been talking
basketball
about.
girl too. So,
Really?
of
Okay.
course, I love the Raptors being in Toronto.
Yeah.
Nice.
I
Nice.
also love Kentucky Go Big Blue for March Madness
Sweet.
basketball. And I'll watch anything in sports. I'm always excited. I'm going to the PWHL game, women's professional
Oh
hockey this
yeah.
Nice.
weekend. So, yeah,
That's good
big sports
hockey.
fan.
Yeah, that's huge. Are they they still don't have team names, right? It's just like it's like Team Toronto still, right?
I
They're
think so. I think so.
yeah.
But the basketball WNBA team has a name, Toronto Tempo, coming around in a few
Oh,
Oh,
years.
nice.
neat.
So
Nice, very cool.
very excited about that in Toronto.
Yeah. And they're like selling out stadiums, the PWHL,
Totally.
which is awesome. So yeah, I know like the
Women's
women's
sports,
league.
man. The most
Yeah.
underrated thing, like for
Hmm.
years, like I grew up playing sports. I played one
Yeah.
year in college and coached for a few years elite girls into their basketball programs, college
Hmm.
programs. But I'm like, oh man, like I've been watching women's sports for so long. And I always wonder, like, why aren't people coming to watch this stuff? Like, why,
Hmm.
like even the NCAA, like I watched the women's tournament and I'm like, how are people not paying attention? I'm so glad Caitlin Clark blew it up, and all
Yeah,
these
good for her.
Angel Reese brought, great publicity. But I'm like, guys, this game has been incredible for decades. Like I go to WNBA games and they're like, a quarter of the bottom bowl. I'm like, what's wrong with people?
Hmm.
So I'm excited because I think a city like Toronto, especially, like we love basketball here. There is a huge
Right.
grassroots basketball
Yeah.
program in and around the area, even where you are, Greg, in London. And so, that gives an opportunity at a cheaper price point for people with
Totally.
kids to come and like enjoy
Yeah.
the game high level. So it's exciting.
That's good.
Nice.
Yeah, my second question was, do you still bleed green? And I know the answer is yes. So that's
Always.
I was like, you're cheering for the Argos now. I just couldn't see it.
Never.
You're
That
a
would
good
never
Saskatchewan girl.
happen. That would never
Good.
happen. I always try to come back for Labor Day Classic too, because that's like one of my favorite games. But yeah, I will always
Nice.
bleed. Always.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation for people. Come to the Labor Day Classic in Saskatchewan. That is the best CFL game, Canadian football that you can find anywhere. I'm sure the ones out east are fine too. Greg, I'm sure you've been to
No,
some of
they're
those,
really
but
bad. They're
The
really bad. I mean,
the Hamilton one
they're
was
Hamilton,
terrible.
fun.
Hamilton, I'll give them. Like Hamilton fans come out to play, like they're really
Yeah, we
fun.
had a fun time last year. I went.
Totally. But Toronto, no. Like there is like, I go to Toronto game, it's like half full and not even. I'm like, what is happening? There's more Saskatchewan fans out there for a Sask
Yeah,
game. I am like, this is not football.
yeah,
Saskatchewan needs to teach the rest of the country how we do football.
yeah, yep. They'll be the best, and they don't win a lot of Grey Cups, but they're the best for, for
Yeah,
sure.
the fans are the best, that's for sure.
Yes.
Favorite country to visit,
Oh my gosh.
or some of your travel recommendations. I need some Molly travel recommendations here. You've been a lot of
I
places, so.
I did some work in Turkey. I would love to
Hmm.
spend more time in Turkey.
Hmm.
The food was incredible. I thought the people were amazing and just the culture just really rich. I
Hmm.
thought that was a really cool place.
Like Istanbul, or do you have a specific place that?
I was like in Reyhanli, like closer to the Syrian
Okay.
border. Like I,
Okay.
I
Mm.
flew in and we traveled, but
Mm.
honestly, like just every kind of different city that we were traveling to, like the kebabs were just a little different. The labna
Oh,
tasted
interesting.
had their own
Oh,
spin on it. And
oh,
yeah, I love the Middle East. So, but I
right.
would say Turkey is like an interesting, super
Mm.
interesting place.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting. Like I went to Erbil, Iraq, which is like the semi-autonomous part of Iraq,
Hmm.
Kurdish area. And it's like, beautifully paved
Hmm.
roads, gorgeous infrastructure. Most of Iraq has like really weathered quite a bit of storms over the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
decades, but Erbil was like
Hmm.
incredible. And I just wouldn't
Wow.
have known that if I didn't go for that story. It was a sad story,
Yeah.
but I just was like, wow. So, I don't know if it's on people's vacation list, but like if
Right.
it, if the Middle East calms down a little bit, pretty cool place to go.
Yeah.
Hmm. That's very cool. Favorite reporter slash storyteller, right? Maybe you already said this with Oprah, but is there anyone else that comes to mind or like that person is just, they're amazing. I'd love to be more like that.
Yeah, I mean I think it's Oprah. I think she does it for me. There's a
She's a
lot of good
queen.
journalists that of
Yeah.
course I pay attention to, but I think she does that mix of the human form and the journalism that's behind it. And yeah, and I've kind of sat in the middle too, because I'm like, I can do the hardcore news,
Right.
but I'm kind of like, people always be like, you're a little bit more casual, you're a little bit more talk show.
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, because I think I just want to talk to people. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it'd be Oprah for sure.
Oh, that's good. And then finally, we do one thing on our show called Stick Taps, where we give a
Yes.
shout out to good people that just deserve a shout out. So we'll leave this to you today, Molly, and you're not prepped for this. So who's some good people that you know that deserve a shout out?
A shout out? Well, my entire team at Big If
Yeah.
True, because they are hustling and we're a small little mighty
Awesome.
team, and like stick tap to them.
Yeah.
And honestly to you guys, because again, you're innovating too. Like you're innovating and doing something new. Like I love it. I love when people
Yeah.
are stepping outside of comfort zones or trying something new. And that's great because that's what I think people want in this media landscape. They want, authenticity and people that can just talk about life. And it's great. Stepping out.
Nice.
Greg, we got a stick tap on our own show.
We
Like
got this. Yeah.
this is why we have Molly
Nice.
on because
Yeah.
I knew she would do this for us. She stick tapped to the host of the show.
Yeah, you
This
can
is
keep
Ad-
that now. Now you can,
yeah.
use that for
yeah,
your promo.
yeah,
Advice to
exactly.
future guests: stick tap us on our own show, please.
Yeah, it makes us feel really good.
Yeah.
No, I
Actually,
appreciate
Molly,
that. Like,
I had one. Actually, I did have one final question. It's kind of
Okay.
a two-parter.
yeah.
In your travels as a journalist, most famous and or scariest person,
Mm,
because you've traveled to some like conflict zones and other scary places. So either most famous or most scariest person you've had to interview.
mm,
Um, Scariest. Oh, that's so funny. I just remember when before in 2015, actually, when Justin Trudeau was campaigning to run for prime minister and they were in third place, he came through Sask. And I was like, oh, I want to do this interview. And I remember my boss being like, if you look into those pretty eyes and come back with a softball interview, you're dead. Like, you know what I mean? And it was just so funny. It was just such a, like, you're such a young journalist. You're just starting and you're like, can't softball this.
yeah.
So I think that was kind of like one of those funny moments because I didn't want to mess that up. But who's the gentleman? I'm forgetting his name because I'm not good with entertainment people, but from Field of Dreams, the main
Mm.
actor, Field
Oh,
of Dreams,
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner. So
Oh,
Oh,
Costner.
cool.
I
Oh.
personally love Kevin Costner. I've always like he's
Mm.
kind of like that silver fox for me.
He's a beautiful man.
So in Edmonton as an intern, I don't know how I pulled the lucky straw, but somehow they were like, Molly, go do this Kevin Costner thing. And I was like probably beaming. Like I was so,
Just
so happy.
flush the whole time, like
Yeah,
fangirling.
totally, totally.
Yeah.
So like some of those moments, but I think
Nice.
those are like the famous people, but I would say like it's the everyday people. Like this one woman I met in Iraq, she was like my age at that time, like 27. Her whole family fled Iraq because they were super educated and, would be targets for ISIS. And she was like, I'm not leaving like all these refugee
Mm.
kids. There was a million that fled
Oh my
north. Like she's like,
gosh.
I'm not leaving these kids. And she was
Mm.
working between like religious groups. So like there's Christians, there's Yazidis, there's Druze, there's Muslims, like there's so many in that
Mm.
area. And like she's a Muslim woman herself. And I have to say, like, I'm not usually a starstruck person. Dealing with her, like we'd walk into the camps and like all the children knew her by name because she was
Yeah.
so invested in their lives. And yes, we were doing this interview. The kids would never leave us because they just love her and what she's done for them. And I just read an article that she's still doing that work. Like she hasn't left
God
yet. It
bless
just
her.
yesterday.
Mm.
But I meet people like that, and I'm like, there's very, very clear purpose to your life, and you are invested in
Mm.
helping other people. And those are the people that like I will never forget.
Yeah.
And
Good
that
stuff.
there's nothing in comparison to any politician or famous person I've ever met
Right.
to people like that. And I've had the privilege of meeting some special people
Mm.
like that.
Right.
Nice. Amazing.
That's a person that doesn't get any public accolades for that,
Yeah.
but does amazing work that keeps our world functioning properly. I
Totally.
think it's those gems, diamonds. Okay, well we better wrap up. Molly, thanks so much for
Yes.
your
Thank
time.
you so much.
That was amazing, and I can't believe we still got. I'm still beaming about the stick taps that we got from Molly
I'm
Thomas.
glowing. You're glowing,
Yeah,
Derek. You're glowing.
now I'm glowing. Now I'm flush. So yeah,
It's
thanks for
great.
doing this, and thanks for all you do in combating misinformation and just being a great reporter and a good person that's out there making a difference. We need more Molly Thomases out there. So
Thank you
hopefully we
so
inspired
much.
some more
Yeah.
Thank you
to
Keep
so
up the
much. And
good work.
everyone, subscribe at Big If True TVO. You can check out our show and subscribe. You can watch from anywhere in the country.
perfect. Yeah,
Nice.
we'll link to it all and do all that
Oh
good
yeah, we'll
stuff.
put it in the show notes. And your Dear Taliban
Nice,
that you did
nice.
as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh, that would be a good one too. All right, thanks,
Thanks,
Molly. Take care.
guys.
Cheers.